because of the link issue. So now let me go ahead and get started. So really quickly, the goal here is for me just to, as we've already done the welcome, I'm just going to give you a quick overview of the program. I talk about some of the admissions items because I know a few of you have applied or are working on your application. And then at the end of the program, we will have 2 MIST alumni come in to share their experience and kind of give you, I think, maybe a more fresh view, because as I alluded to, it's been a while since I've been through the program. So really at this point, you should probably just take my staff experience more seriously than anything else, I suppose. So with that in mind, for the overview of the MIST program, one of the things that's going to set our program somewhat different or apart comparative to other programs is that we're housed in the School of Computing and Design, and that gives us a wider range of background in terms of the faculty that really teach in this program. So we have folks who have a K-12 teaching background, folks who've worked in the private sector of instructional design and corporate training. We have one faculty member who has actually a vast military education background. So this diversity in terms of expertise, not just in terms of technology, but in where that technology was used for learning, is really a great benefit, I think, to you as students, because you get to see really how this technology can be used in any learning or education environment. With that in mind, our program focuses very heavily on instructional technology in both corporate and educational settings. So we're not necessarily an MEd program or a curriculum and instruction program. We're a little bit different where there is some learning theory involved, but really the vast majority of our program is focused on the sound usage of different forms of education technology, from web design products to audio and visual production products, and even to e-learning software like Adobe Captivate, Articulate, Storyline, Xertis. So there's quite a few different ones that we look at in the program, all of which are naturally used in kind of different instructional design and education technology roles, okay? And then lastly, our program really does focus on the preparation for professionals to use technology in both distance and traditional settings. So I've alluded to the fact that I'm a faculty member at CSUMB, and I still use a lot of the technology that I learned in the program, updated versions of it naturally, but still use a lot of those technologies to help better my in-person teaching when we are in-person teaching. But it really does help, because naturally, even in-person education, I think a lot of you can probably agree with me here, you're still using a lot of online learning type technology, and you're using a lot of online learning theory. And so those types of things, they're becoming somewhat interwoven now, and having the skill sets to do both forms of education well, I think is a huge selling point in anybody's career progression, okay? All right, so naturally, one of the things you'll find with our program is we're always looking at it from an instructional design model in terms of how we're trying to educate you, but also provide you some of the theories and development to do well in that type of role. So anybody who's familiar with the ADDIE model would be pretty familiar with what I'm going to say next, which our goal is really to have you be able to plan out different forms of trainings or instructional modules, design them in a way that's beneficial to the learner, develop them using new and informed technology usage, and then implement them also, once again, in a way that's mindful of the types of learners that you have. So we talk a lot about needs analysis, we talk a lot about learner analysis, because our goal is really to make sure that the technologies that we're using are really sound, because not every technology that we would teach in the program might fit your individual work setting, okay? And then lastly, one of the things, especially for those of you who maybe are looking to do either training or really kind of a true classroom education environment, one of the biggest things is seeing if the instructional program that you're doing is going well and being able to actually evaluate it. So we do teach a lot of skill sets that are helpful in both the summative and the formative evaluations, so that you can have an idea of how things are progressing, both at the start and the end of the training or teaching that you're doing, okay? And then lastly, another big focus of our program is on project management and leadership skills that I think help people take on bigger roles in the types of work that all of you are already doing. I think all of you have a background that can fit this program. And so these are the types of things that we're trying to help folks pick up skill sets that can kind of help them take the next step in their careers, regardless if they're instructional designers or teachers or folks like myself who are more on the periphery of the education, more in a support role, okay? All right, so I've kind of alluded to a couple of the items already on this slide. But, just to kind of reiterate, I suppose, we are housed in the School of Computing and Design, so naturally our program is much more focused on the technology side of the house. I've given you what some of those technologies will look like, but the thing that I also want to do here is be careful that we're not necessarily expecting anybody to be an expert in this technology day one. The goal is to really build from a very foundational level up. So the first class that you would take would be IST 501, which is our technology workshop. And so I kind of joke with students, if you were like me and you had a English undergraduate degree, you probably weren't the most technology sound person, but if you can use a computer, if you can do email, that's really the baseline skill that we're looking at, is that you can just use a computer soundly. If you can do that, then you're more than ready to go for this program, because that's where we'll start with teaching some of the web development skills to be able to do the rest of the stuff, like using things like instructional design software to make your learning maybe potentially a little more engaging, or just a little bit different in this environment where you can take advantage of some of these online learning tools. Okay. Another aspect of our program, and I got some good questions before the open house that I think can fit this particular next talking point, which is our program has two particular tracks to it. It has a full-time track, which admittedly is the more popular track, and that's about a 16-month program. And we also have a part-time track that's about 27 months long, okay? In either case, that ends up looking like about a 4-semester program or an 8-semester program. In either case, full-time working professionals can do fine in either program. It really just comes down to personal desire and knowing really kind of what fits your schedule best, both professionally with your home life, things of that nature. So we really do like folks to have a full-time gig if they can, because it really informs your learning well. You'll have a good environment to try some of these things that we're teaching in, and vice versa. You can bring some of the skill sets that you have in your career into the program to benefit your peers. So I think it's really a great thing for full-time professionals to be in this program at the same time as their standard day job. I know that can be a little scary, but I really do believe that. Okay. In terms of the length of study for our program and some of the other kind of general information about it, by and large, the program is taken in a 4-semester model. So that would be a fall start with a spring, summer, and then a subsequent fall to complete the program, or roughly about 16 months of time. There are 2 forms of study. You can either do a blended program, which quite frankly is pretty much turned into an online program because of the pandemic, or you can do an online program that's 8 weeks in nature. So the blended program has 16-week classes. So generally speaking, if that was the program of interest, you'd be taking more classes at once, but you'd be taking them over a longer period of time. Whereas with the online program, you'd be taking maybe 1 or 2 classes at a time, but they would be shorter in length. So it's a similar workload regardless of which program you ended up picking, okay? For the blended program, normally we would have synchronous sessions face-to-face. The reality is the soonest those could even possibly happen would be summer, but I can't even make that guarantee. So we'd have to see how that would work for the subsequent fall. I just don't know yet, to be really frank. But for the online program, it'd be essentially what we're doing right now. You would jump into Zoom, you would attend the orientation sessions and things of that nature to get the similar type of orientation work that you would do on campus if you were a blended student, okay? For the blended program and the online program, regardless of which you would choose, there's usually a combination of some 4-unit core class, i.e. kind of the major focus of our field, I suppose, would take place in those classes, while the 2-unit classes usually focus on a very distinct piece of technology or a very distinct type of skill to support the core class learning. And I'll talk about that a little bit more later. And then lastly, regardless of program, once again, there would be a capstone course that's 16 weeks long, and the cool thing about this is that you have one of 2 options. There's a project-based capstone where you're really focusing on creating 1 hour of really solid instruction or training using some type of e-learning software, or you're doing a research thesis if you're going to go on and get a doctorate degree. So really there's 2 options there, and I'll discuss those a little bit later as well. Okay. Regardless of program, there's a 36-unit total to graduate, and both programs have a relatively similar tuition model, with the full tuition for the online program being about $18,000 and about $16,000 for the blended program. But naturally, there are other costs for the blended program that would include travel to campus. So that's how they end up kind of meeting in the middle, I suppose. Okay. All right. And then regardless of program, the starting date would be the end of August 2021. There are some options for an early start through a program called Open University. So it would just depend too. If you're somebody who really wants to get a start in the spring, there are options to do that. Okay. All right. In terms of the curriculum, they are identical. So I'll just try to talk about them in a way that I think combines the two programs at once. So in terms of the fully online model, the terms are broken up into 8 weeks, as I said before. And in the first term, you would take an instructional technology class, which is a relative survey of the different forms of instructional technologies used in the field. That would be combined with the tech workshop class that does everything from some web development to some audio and video production skill development. It really gives you all of the foundational skills in technology to learn some of the more advanced technology as you progress through the program. In the second 8 weeks of that first semester for the fully online program, you would take an instructional design class where you'd learn how to develop an instructional design document, learn how to really develop a project from start to finish in terms of storyboarding, all the types of skills needed to create a sound instructional design module. And that would be partnered with, the writing workshop class, where we kind of help you get some graduate writing skills that are required for some of the capstone items and also for some of the future classes in the program. In the spring, or the next 2 terms, essentially, there would be a few more classes in terms of a little bit of learning theory that would go, and we really, if you've taken some education classes in the past, you'll feel very comfortable here. And even if you haven't, the great thing is, once again, we're looking at learning theories in a way that can kind of back end help your capstone a little bit, but also provide you a little bit of an idea of how you would want to kind of inform some of the modules that you're creating in this term in your future classes. The support class here, an elective class for that matter, is the audio and video production class, heavily focused on the use of Camtasia, TechSmith, and a couple other platforms to do that type of work within. It's a really awesome class. Our professor who teaches that is actually an instructional designer on campus. So he's very good at knowing how to use that stuff. He's a great resource for that particular class. In the second term for the spring, there would be the interactive multimedia class, and this is where the focus is on really the instructional design software that's common in our field. So students generally pick either Adobe Captivate or Articulate Storyline to focus on. Generally speaking, those using Adobe Captivate would be more in the corporate sector or with learners who are usually a little bit older, whereas those using Articulate Storyline are usually K-12 or using it with younger learners. Okay. Then when we transition to the summer, there's an assessment and evaluation class, which does have some statistics to it, but by and large, the goal of it is to learn summative, informative evaluation skills. So for example, in the spring, when you're creating learning modules in term 4, you're not really testing them for their effectiveness. You're just learning how to learn the software in a lot of ways. In term 5, you're now taking this where you can actually now hopefully start to use them with learners and see if they're actually being effective throughout the whole process, right? You can do a formative evaluation during the process where, as you're designing modules, you're getting to test them with your learners. And then at the end, you can follow up with a summative evaluation to really see if learning took place. And so those are some skill sets that you learn not only to use from prior classes and some of the tech that you're learning, but also skill sets that you can learn to use for your capstone. Okay. In term 6, there's an advanced instructional design class. So when you've been picking up all of these skills, not just the theoretical development, but also the practical kind of hard skills, now you're putting them to the test, I suppose, by working with a real client. So we partner with the Department of Defense, the National Library of Congress, Fortune 500 companies, different universities. They'll have little instructional design projects where basically you and your learning team would partner with them to create a very small little learning module over a 10-week course period. Okay, so it's a chance to really get some good feedback outside of just your professors and myself. Now you're getting to see how folks in the field are seeing your instructional design work, and it's a great way to see where certain skills still need to be developed or where you're doing very, very well. Folks end up loving that class because they get to really work on something kind of outside of the program, I suppose is the best way to put it. That is partnered with our second elective, the Multimedia 2 class, which is really a web design class. So some HTML skills, some JavaScripting skills, and some relative Java skills, all taught once again at the novice level up. Okay, so you don't need to have any of those skill sets to do well in that class. All right, and then in the final term for the fully online program, the final 2 terms, excuse me, would be the capstone. And so I've alluded to before the project-based capstone. With that, that's usually about really just an hour solid of learning. Okay, and that might not sound like a lot, but when you're learning some of these skills and technologies, that actually is a pretty tall task to make a really sound, well-developed and well storyboarded and well-designed learning module. So you get a chance to really kind of put all of your skills that you've learned in the previous semesters together to really put it to practice, I suppose. That in conjunction could be done with a research thesis, but most people would do a research thesis alone if they choose that option. And the research thesis naturally would just be a full-on regular master's thesis with the end goal of it being a writing sample for publication and also for potential PhD applications. And most folks are going to pick the project-based capstone. That's just kind of the reality of the situation. But those 2 options are there. Okay. So just to show that what it would look for the blended program in comparison, you can see that really you're taking more classes at once, but all the same classes are there. The only difference, and really one of the electives that I skipped over for the fully online program, is in the spring online program, students could also take research methods. Blended students could take research methods. Most won't, unless you're writing a research thesis. The only other class that's not offered in the online program, but still technically kind of is, I don't want to jump down that rabbit hole too much, is the project management class. That's generally just offered in the blended program, but if you were an online student and you really wanted to take the project management class, we could ultimately make that happen, okay? The only difference that you see in these is that obviously you'd be taking more classes at once, and you would kind of do one major orientation day for the blended program. Whereas in comparison, if we go back to the online program, you would have just a little 1-day, 2 or 3 hour orientation at the start of each of these terms, comparative to maybe a more longer session for the blended program. So I hope that makes some relative sense in the difference between the 2 programs. But ultimately, they do act pretty much the same, okay? All right, so with that in mind, in terms of some of the kind of key curricular outcomes, the goal is really in that first semester to develop a common understanding of the field and some familiarity with the instructional design processes. So to me, I think to use a lot of the technology well, a big piece of it is learning how to first kind of design and lesson plan and things of that nature and create, a relative plan and map for training programs if you are more on the corporate side. So those are skill sets that I think all help to then underpin in the spring when you're starting to really more heavily focus on technology usage. Now you've not only have some of the instructional design back-end processes, but you're learning some of the learning theories to then develop stronger mini learning modules in the spring. Okay, and that's really where you're starting to use Captivate or Storyline in ways that are more kind of common for the field. In the summer, that's when we would go back and start to learn some of the summative and formative evaluation skills, and also perform a lot of the usability and reliability tests. Once again, testing to see that the types of things that you're creating are working well, all right? And then obviously at the end of the program, the goal is to finish a capstone project or thesis that connects with your career as a culminating experience. So a lot of folks will end up creating a capstone in conjunction with where they're currently employed. So a lot of teachers will create a capstone that they'll use with their students in their classroom. For those more in the private sector, they'll generally end up, meeting with a manager and creating a training for their team or something of that nature. We really hope that the capstone can be something that can either benefit you right away where you currently work, or it can be a great kind of resume item for the next job that you see kind of in your future, if that makes some sense, okay? Now, with all of that said, throughout each and every term, you're using interactive multimedia software, you're learning new types and forms of information technology, and you're also learning how to use different forms of media for learning. And those are done not just through team-based projects, but also learning projects, or individual learning projects, excuse me. And so one other thing I would add there is that this program does have a relatively heavy component of team learning. I think, Yerlani, you being in a class right now, you could probably speak to that a little bit. By and large, those learning teams are really a benefit. So you're doing a lot of work on your own, but you're doing a fair amount of work with a team as well. And I place everybody in the teams based on their backgrounds. I get to know you very well based on your applications. And so I sit there and I kind of study you all and then put you all into learning teams that I think would benefit you the most, okay? And ultimately, I think most people who've gone through the program would say that some of the best learning that they've gotten through the program has been with their teams that they're working with. Okay, so I think it's a huge benefit of our program. And hopefully the students who come in later can speak to that a little bit. Okay, all right. So kind of a thing I like to talk about too is what maybe the typical week for a student would look like in our program. And we use a little bit of an interesting model where our week starts on a Wednesday and then it finishes on a Tuesday of the following week. And so on Wednesday, that's when the new modules open up. So we recommend that students kind of take some time to look at the learning requirements for that week and go ahead and do some of the preliminary reading if that's required. Then in Thursday, the focus is, for me at least, it was usually doing a little bit more reading if that was there. And then a lot of the classes will have some type of discussion component, whether it be a forum, whether it be potentially in some cases a synchronous session. In those cases, you would perform those, kind of get that kind of out of the way, I suppose. And then on Friday, it's a great time to start assignments, finish any reading that you have, and ask questions. The thing I love about our faculty is they're very quick on the draw to respond to you. It's amazing. I've sent them questions when I was a student. I would get a response at like 2 in the morning. It was crazy. But they're really good about responding and answering questions that you might have about your work. On Saturday, I always personally made that a big work day, and I would just really go hard on my assignments, really focus on the various activities that I had to achieve to make the week kind of be completed. And then I recommend at least one day off. I usually tried to make it where I could have both Sunday and Monday off so I could have a little bit of free time for myself. But for a lot of students, they'll put a little bit of time on Monday and Tuesday to finalize their assignments, perform any of the discussion forums that they still need to perform, submit their assignments, and start to get prepared for the next module. Okay, and in some classes, admittedly, they'll kind of have projects that span over multiple weeks. So this isn't always the typical week, but it's probably more typical than not, I suppose, is the best way for me to frame that. Okay. Okay. Some of the kind of very common questions, a great question is what we end up seeing a lot of our students do after completing the program. And naturally, since it's a program focused on instructional design, most of those careers end up being instructional design related. But it is my belief that it does prepare you for a whole host of careers, everything from the ed tech kind of side of the house to instructional design. But a lot of folks will also promote up if they're working in a school setting. A lot of them will promote up to a director of STEM or ed tech. For those in the corporate sector, they'll generally make the transition to instructional designers or corporate trainers. And then for those in higher ed, it's been a wide range. We've seen a lot of folks, even if I use our own context at CSUMB, a few of them have transitioned departments to become instructional designers, and some have just moved up more into management type roles. Okay, so really it's a little dependent on your kind of ultimate career progression and your ultimate career setting currently, but by and large, our folks tend to have pretty good outcomes through completion of this degree. Okay, all right. And then lastly, I suppose I'll just kind of wrap up some of the admission items. The most important date, in my opinion, is naturally the final deadline for the application. That would be May 31st. We do have a priority deadline, and we are receiving probably more applications now than probably comparative to past cohorts. I can't really speak to why that's the case, but that's just the way it is, I suppose. So we do have a priority deadline of December 15th. So most folks who apply by December 15th will have a much higher likelihood of being admitted because there's a smaller application pool at that time. For both programs, we will not be admitting above 20 new students this semester. We just don't have the space because we had a relatively large intake from last semester. So with that in mind, we're probably going to keep our programs a little bit smaller this upcoming fall in 2021. With the application requirements in mind, the first step is completing the Cal State Apply application. We have a video guide on our website on how to do that. I really don't look at the application as a test. It's just kind of something you have to do. We really want to get to know you through your application versus test you on your application. So the items that we like to look at to get a better sense of you is first your official college transcripts. To be fair, they can be unofficial on the online application, but the university will need official copies of your transcripts naturally. The next item would be a statement of purpose. Really, the goal is to get a feel for why you want to be in the program, what are the types of skills you want to develop, why you see the program benefiting you, and also some of the things that you can bring into the program as a student. Okay. From there, a couple letters of recommendation on the application. Okay, I think I see a little chat here. Pull up the chat so I'm not missing anything. Okay. Yeah, that's a great question. So Steve brought up a good point that the application doesn't have a true kind of like letter of recommendation slot. So I don't know if you saw it, Steve, but there is a link in the application to a Google form that recommenders can use. If you didn't, don't even worry about it. I'll send it to you by email. And then your recommenders can just fill out a recommendation form where they rate you on a 1 to 5 scale on some various items. And then there's a little narrative section they can fill out too to provide any other details. Yeah.
I already have letters of recommendation.
Yeah. If you just want to shoot me an email with them, that works too.
Okay, cool.
If you have prior LORs and you just want to email them to me, that's fine. And something with the application, this is true of any of these items. The problem with Cal State Applies, it kind of just gives some general options for documents. And really, you could upload them anywhere on that final section of the application. And what I mean by that is you could put like a letter of recommendation in what's kind of labeled as a transcript Dropbox on the application. And I wouldn't really know that it was, you know, supposedly a transcript because they just give me the documents. So it's kind of a weird system where they should just give you 5 slots to upload stuff. But we're kind of working with what the vendor provides, I suppose. Okay. So I don't think it's relevant in this particular situation, but I'll say it since this is being recorded. If you had performed your education outside of the United States, technically you would still need to provide a TOEFL score to prove English proficiency and also do a foreign credit evaluation. But I don't think that's relatable to anybody in this particular group. Okay, so those are kind of the admissions items for the program. Let me move forward. Any questions I can answer at this time while we're waiting for our student rep to pop in?
Dr. Eller,
Yeah.
I have a quick question. Since I've been out of college for almost 20 years,
Yeah.
what would be an ideal letter of recommendation? I mean, do you guys accept employers or even, I don't know, that has been one of those things like, wow, it's been a while, so I don't have a professor per se to say, hey.
Yeah, that's a great question. And you know, that's something I should have said. But the whole goal with the letter of recommendation is it could be a professor, that's fantastic, but it could also more realistically, since most of our program is really, I shouldn't say that it's necessarily a professional program, but it's more on the professional side than the academic side. And so with that in mind, it can absolutely be coworkers, it can be a supervisor, in some cases, even folks, peers who can speak to certain technical skills or certain instructional skills, that's been fine too. So really the goal with the letter of recommendation is just to get a feel for you as an applicant. So there's not really a perfect recommender, but I think the better options tend to be either folks that you're working with or previous professors. Either option would work well.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Yeah, of course.
So I'm applying for fall 2021, okay. And I just applied actually today. But okay. Technically, I don't graduate with my bachelor's from Sac State until July. Is that okay? That's
absolutely fine. Yeah, the degree itself, just in case this is relevant to anybody else in the group, the degree itself doesn't actually need to be completed until the first day of class. So you have a good window there where you'll complete your degree with just about enough time for Sac State to kind of notate. The only downside in your case, Steve, is we'll have to wait a couple of weeks before you order your transcripts, because what they're going to do is they're not going to notate you graduated until about 2 weeks after you actually completed the program. So wait a little bit, send your transcripts at like the absolute last minute, but that's absolutely fine.
Cool. Dr. I have another question real quick.
Sure,
you mentioned something through the presentation that you would either take one approach or one focus or the other, whether it was K through 12 or you know, the private sector. But I'm curious to, I mean, since I work in education right now, and this is sort of how I'm framing this program and how I want to continue in there. However, I mean, you mentioned all this software and all this technology that, you know, would be applicable to the private sector. So I guess my question is, would you be able to have kind of both feet in both sectors, or once you choose one route, that's the way to go?
Yeah, no, that's a great clarifying question. So, you know, for our program, the way that I I guess the way I try to frame it is that we are going to teach skills that are relevant to any environment. And the goal is that especially when I place you on learning teams, for example, I don't just take K through 12 folks and put them into a team, or higher ed folks and put them into a team, or corporate and put them into a team. I really try to mix you guys up so that you can get a wider breadth of a learning experience. So you can pick up skills that are relevant to a corporate side or K through 12 or wherever, really. In terms of, I think, probably where I might have confused you a little bit is the technology itself. Because the e-learning software can be a little expensive, we try to recommend that folks pick one and just purchase one. We used to have a partnership with Adobe. We're still kind of working it out for this year. But that's a piece of software that's normally, like, for example, Adobe Captivate is generally $1,000, right? It's a very expensive piece of software. Steve, yeah, you want to jump in real fast?
Yeah, Captivate also has a monthly plan for $40 a month for a year contract. My friend works for Adobe. He got me a
okay, perfect.
so that's the thing. And I use Adobe Captivate with my 5th graders.
Yeah, it can absolutely be used with younger learners. The reason why I sometimes recommend Articulate is some of the character models that they make for Articulate are really, I shouldn't say cutesy, but they're a little bit more age appropriate, I suppose, for younger learners is one way of putting it. But the other thing too, not just in terms of the $40 a month, but if you can kind of provide proof that you're in a graduate program or you're in any kind of college setting, Adobe will knock the price down to $299. And so that's, at least that's where we can get you in terms of that price. Storyline is also really, really expensive. So regardless of ultimately what platform you choose, this is why we've started to also look at some of the free options. So Xerxes, for example, is a free e-learning software program. And we used to, and I believe we still do, have a partnership with mAuthor, which is a European e-learning platform. They're a little bit newer, but it's also really great for K through 12 environments. So with them, you just have to pay a ceremonial price of $1, and then you have access to their e-learning software. So it's a really interesting program. So with that in mind, yeah, Steve, go ahead.
About Adobe Spark.
Adobe Spark is included. So if you work for the university, you attend the university as a student, you have access to the entire Adobe suite minus Captivate, which is kind of a shame. But so you would have Adobe Spark included. I will be honest, it's not something we heavily focus on in the program. It's kind of a jump tip material in our view, but it's certainly something you can use in the program if you so choose. And Chris, the professor for the audio-visual class and for the web design class, he's very well versed into Adobe Spark. So for those who want to use it, he's still a great resource, but it's just not a requirement of our program. Yeah. Any other questions I can answer at this time? We do have a couple of minutes before our rep will show up.
Ryan, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Do the transcripts that we send in need to be sealed for, I mean, I know the copies are okay on the system, but ones we actually send in, do they have to be sealed?
Yeah, so for the ones that you send into the university, those would have to kind of be your standard sealed transcript, or they could be official electronic transcripts. And that's actually a really good question because it brings up this point. With the pandemic, Christy, you may have felt this at your office. The mail is slow on our campus, like really brutally slow, and they're doing the best they can. It's not a knock on them by any means, but it's just really, it takes a long time. So for those sending in transcripts, I highly recommend electronic official copies. Most universities will do that for the same price or maybe just a small extra fee. Those we will, if you send them to us electronically, the different transcript services, they can get it to us in 24 to 48 hours and they'll be posted very quickly. If you go the snail mail route, it can take a month to 2 months for us to actually get the document and see it. So in other words, e-transcripts are like 2 thumbs up, but on your actual application, it can be a scanned copy. It can be you copy and paste it off your unofficial student account. We just need a loose idea of how you did, because what I didn't mention in the application requirements is that the actual only firm requirement for the program is a 2.5 undergraduate GPA, which most people don't struggle to reach. That's what the CSU sets for graduate students, and so we've made it. We've never budged from that. There's no point to it, in our opinion. So really, the transcripts are more to check a box in our idea. The real important items to us is the statement of purpose and the letters of recommendation, but really the statement of purpose, because our goal through the application process is to make sure that this is the right program for you, and kind of vice versa. So the students feel comfortable coming to us, and we feel comfortable that the student's going to get out of the program really what they envision. Because I think sometimes students get a little confused. They think like this is a master's of computer science. It's not, or they think it's kind of something that it isn't. And so we just want to make sure that everybody's kind of on the same page through the application process. So good question. I know I went a little bit into a ramble there, but good question.
Is the like I ordered some from my college official ones and I didn't open them. Is that the same? Is that okay to drop off?
Totally okay. I don't, in the past, it'd be super easy. You could just walk it right up to the admissions office and plop it on their desk, and it would be like good to go in like 2 hours, we'd see it. But, through the newer setup, I don't know how well. I'm sure inter-office mail is still moving pretty quickly. So if you put it through inter-office mail in your case, that might be the safer route. Because I don't even know if that building is open, to be honest with you, building 47. Yeah. I haven't been to campus in so long. Yeah. Yeah.
Can I ask one last thing?
Yeah, please, of course.
Do you look at people who apply early, give them any kind of priority, or does it matter if you apply early or later?
Yeah, that's a good question. So in terms of, even though we have deadlines, so we have the December 15th priority deadline. We have kind of the March, we considered March 31st our regular deadline, and then our final deadline is May 31st. We review in batches. So let's say everybody who's applied in October, we will review you now and give you an admissions decision or feedback on how to be admitted if there's something that we're not feeling comfortable about. And that would be true of people applying in November or December. So, my personal recommendation is just to apply sooner rather than later, really from the standpoint of, for two reasons. One, we can give you feedback sooner, but then two, and more importantly, because we're lowering the amount of students we're taking in this year, it will be slightly more competitive, because the big range of applications tend to be March through May. And I think that's just because our deadline is so late. A lot of folks just kind of go, all right, well, I'll just wait until May and apply. Normally in the past, that's not a huge issue, but this year I think that could be a little bit of a bigger issue, just because we have already had more applications in October than we've had in any application season at this point in time. So I do recommend applying early, but it doesn't need to be like tomorrow. It could be anytime, I think, before December, and you'd have a very good shot at being admitted.
Dr. Eller, the application only asks for one copy. Is it one copy of transcripts or two?
Yeah, so that's something where I think it's not super duper clear. What I'm thinking of with the one copy is one official copy to the university itself. For the application, like I said before, it can be about as unofficial as you want it to be. We just want an idea of what your classes look like. Because ultimately, in terms of the transcripts, we're not going to do anything with them until we actually send you up to the Office of Admissions to admit you. So we make our decision. We let you know that we have a plan to admit you through a formal offer letter. And then while we're kind of performing that process with you, we're having admissions review you on the back end. And so once they receive your transcripts, their sole job in terms of this whole admissions process is just to check you for admissibility purposes. So once again, they're just looking to see that you have a completed undergraduate or in progress undergraduate degree and a 2.5 GPA or higher by the time you're going to graduate. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, and then I'm just curious, as an alumni, do I still request transcripts?
That's a really good question. Thank you. For CSUMB folks, you've got the small advantage of, yes, you don't need to send anything in, with the caveat that you do need to send in anything that you did outside of CSUMB, if you did any community college work pre or post your completion of your degree.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Yes. Okay, cool. Glad I got that for you. All right. We
don't have to turn in sorry.
Oh,
we don't have to turn in the officials until after we figure out if we're accepted, or?
Yeah, really good question. I would really recommend not sending in officials until we've offered you a letter of admission.
Okay.
Because
Waste $10 per student.
exactly. Now, the reality is, I've seen some of your applications already, and I've also talked to a lot of you. So I don't foresee a lot of huge issues here. But yeah, you could order now, but like you're saying, Steve, I mean, the potential is technically we could deny you. And so then you would have spent money on a transcript that you didn't need to send in. So by and large, I just recommend folks wait until that happens. But if you've already sent them in, it's probably not going to be money wasted. Okay, cool. I think I see one more chat in here. Okay, cool. Any other last burning questions? Because probably about 2 minutes before Amanda, our student rep, is going to show up.
When we come on the weekends, how many hours a day is that usually?
It's a really good question. So for the blended program, I will be honest, it's a big weekend. So generally speaking, it's about an 8 or 9 o'clock. Well, really more 9 o'clock. Let's get real here. I'm not going to be up at 8 o'clock in the morning. It's a 9 o'clock start, and it kind of ends about 4 o'clock most days. The first weekend is a little bit of the longer weekend. And then each subsequent weekend from there, they get a little bit shorter because the first weekend we're doing some orientation to the university, most specifically for folks who don't have kind of that CSUMB background, but it's still useful for those returning to do their graduate degree. And then really the future orientations are just course related. So the weekends actually get shorter and shorter as the program kind of persists, if you will. But yeah, the first one is generally for blended folks, it's about a 2 or 3 day experience. And this actually might not be a bad place for me to throw the kind of floor to Amanda. Let me stop sharing here. Amanda, do you want to talk a little bit about the orientation experience for the online folks, since you were an online student? Amanda, I'm not here. Oh, you're muted, Amanda.
Sorry, I just connected my headphones and didn't.
Yeah, no worries. Sorry, put you on the floor immediately.
No, it's okay. I mean, the orientation, if I remember, it's about 3 hours. I don't remember all the details about it. I had just had a baby 3 days before orientation, so so it was a little it was a lot going on that week. But very, very informational. The dates were very important to remember, and just getting your feel for what you're getting into. The courses, I remember they talked about the courses, what we should expect with our course load, kind of the flow of the courses. They talked about the capstone. They really give you a lot of information all at once. And I remember I took notes because I knew, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to remember this later. But, now being close to the end of the program, it's been a crazy fast year. But, I definitely feel like each step of the way, each class, just built on each other and really made it easy to go from one class to the next. And everyone was allowed to connect to their personal experiences. And it turned out, even if everyone thought that they didn't have experience with instructional design, it's so flexible that once you start talking about it and learning the terms, learning what it is and what it isn't, everyone from different backgrounds was able to go, oh, well, I was already doing instructional design. I was already doing this aspect of it. And it allowing everyone to work together, and especially the cohorts and the teams. You stay with your team throughout, and you just build those relationships, and it's been great.
So Amanda, if you don't mind me putting you on the spot a little bit more, could you talk a little bit about kind of, what led you up to doing the program, and also a little bit about some of the things that you've learned and you're kind of using as you're going through the program?
Sure. So what led me up to being, applying for the program, I have my master's in elementary education, and I taught for 4 years, 1 year teaching gifted, and then the last 3 years teaching 6th grade. And at that school that I was at for the last 2 years, they were really integrating technology a lot. I helped pilot a reading intervention program. And with the reading intervention program, a lot of the other teachers needed help with the system, how to present it, how to organize the students, how to create centers. And I was really spending a lot of time helping other teachers. And I realized that I really liked doing that I really liked teaching adults and, helping teachers and adult learners. And I was like, okay, let's see where I can go with this, because sixth graders get tiring after 3 years. So I really, was like, let's make this shift. Let's try to, try out this adult learning. And my husband helped me do some research for programs that were kind of in alignment with this shift that I was wanting to take in my career. And after looking at several different programs, the MIST program at CSUMB just was the best fit, it seemed. And I'm able to use a lot of my educational theory background that's actually really helped me. That kind of really went hand in hand. And it was just learning more about the adult education aspect of it. And then definitely learning more about creating content, not just lessons, but everything past that with the web design and the videos and photo editing. It's really just been a great experience and has built on everything. Did I answer both parts of your question?
Yeah, I think you did.
Okay.
I don't even remember my question. So with that in mind, I'll open the floor here to students. If you guys want to kind of, unfortunately, Amanda, pepper you with questions about the program to give you guys maybe a more current student experience. She's a great resource. Something I should say about Amanda is she's such an excellent student in our program. She's actually a graduate assistant for our program, helping support a couple of the classes that are being taught this fall and will be next semester as well. So she's a great reference to kind of ask any burning questions you might have from a student standpoint about the program. So fire away.
If I may. Oh,
Sure.
sorry, Steve.
No, go ahead, ladies first.
So Amanda, you mentioned that, that you have an educational background. I work in education right now, but I'm not a teacher. I'm a community coordinator, so I work more in the aspect of supporting families, students, etc. Do you feel that the program, so you have that background, so they were speaking your language. For those of us who sort of have a knowledge but don't have a full educational background, do you think that it would be that we would come in kind of having to gain some ground, or that we can start from scratch and learn as far as the theory goes? Because I mean, I don't know all the intricacies of education, but in supporting students or teachers, I've gotten, a little bit. But so I guess one of my burning questions is, do you have to have an educational background in order to succeed in this program?
Oh, not at all. Not at all. Just for me, it really gave me that first, I was able to springboard from it and really learn deeper and apply my knowledge. But you definitely, the way that the courses are structured are that it starts with your introduction to the theories. Sorry, a cat just jumped on my lap. Introduction to your theories in 524. And the way that it's presented, you're really immersed in it. You read articles, what's current in instructional design, how those theories how they started in regards of building instructional design as a as a field. What was instructional design? How did it start? How has it evolved with everything that has come? And so you start with the basics and you just kind of skim into it. And then your second semester, if you're doing the fully online, you go way deeper into it. In IST 520 is the theories and how the brain works. So you skim it in your first semester, but it's enough of an immersive experience and everything that's provided that it all just comes together. It really, really does. And the support's there. A lot of team activities really, really help, being able to lean on your team throughout the whole program. And then, like I said, you do go deeper into it in 520. And each week is just rich with readings, rich with discussion boards, and deeper learning into how the brain works. How do you motivate learners? How can you use these theories in application? with instructional theory and strategy while really building a rich learning experience for your learners, for, you know, whoever they may be.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So were you still teaching when you were going through this program?
No, because I had my baby, like I said, 3 days before I started.
Oh,
And then, yeah, so I took the year off of teaching. But one of my team members in my group, she was teaching the whole time.
So you would say that the workload is decent where you can work full time as a teacher and create, okay, that was pretty much.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, one of my team members, her name's Kelly. She was teaching 6th grade. Let's see, further south in California than I was. It's a really small town. I can never remember the name of it. But she was teaching. Aldo, another person on my team, he was working for a school district at the district level, helping create supports for teachers. And then another person on my team, Carol, she was working for Apple full time too.
Oh, okay.
So,
I was wondering, just because I work full time and I take about 22 units a semester right now, and I was just wondering if, like, I know it's a master's program, so I'm assuming it'll be a little harder than taking 22 units. So I was just wondering if it's something that it's equivalent to. Okay. So,
yeah, it definitely, probably about the first 3 weeks of the program is where you just find your legs, where you go, okay, you know, that it seems like a lot of information. There's a lot of things I need to keep up with. What do I need to read? What do I need to skim? But reaching out to the professors and, you know, other students that have been there, like I'll be a resource, you know, and it really just helps to use everything that's provided for you. The calendars, they've been really open with office hours and providing that option for students recently because of COVID. You know, we know that everything is high stress right now and there's a lot going on. So providing the extra opportunities with Zoom office hours for questions and elaborations on the content has been really, really, really helpful.
and do we use Canvas or do we use something else?
Well, currently we're in iLearn, but there's going to be a switch to Canvas next year, I believe in June, Dr. Eller?
That sounds about right. I think it will ultimately roll out about the time you all would start in the program. So I know a lot of folks, if you're currently at another university or have been in one recently, Canvas is probably what you're used to anyways. And then for those of you who are coming back, it will be just fine because you weren't used to anything anyway. So it will just kind of be one of those things we'll learn as we go. But I think Canvas is very intuitive. I used it in my doctoral program and I actually really liked it. I like iLearn too. I think they both have their kind of their pros and their cons. But I think certainly for those who are new to e-learning and more kind of learning management systems as a whole, you'll find Canvas to be pretty intuitive. Yeah. So not to step on your toes, Amanda. I want to be respectful of everybody's time. It is past 6:30. If there's any questions that you might want to ask Amanda, please feel free.
I'll put my email in the chat if anyone wants to reach out to me later.
Or if you have anything burning right now, it might not be a bad time because you got her in front of you. But other than that, yes, there's her chat, or not her chat, excuse me, her email. Sorry, my brain's fried. I'm also dealing with a little one at home, so I hear you.
I had just gotten her to sleep when I came down.
Yeah, I had to do that. I had to put my daughter down for a nap at 5:30 to try to make this not happen. Okay, any questions that could be asked for me or for Amanda at this point? No, cool. So then I'll also add my email to the chat just in case you need it. Mine's a little easier to remember because it's reller@csumb.edu. But also we have a mist@csumb.edu email that I control as well. So if you just want to go straight to that, that works just fine. Otherwise, have a great evening. If you have any questions about the program or the application, feel free to reach out. I'm here 40 hours a week just for this program. So the goal is really to be of service to you guys if you need it. Okay, cool.
Thank you so much. This was awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, take care, everybody.
Bye. You too. Stay healthy and safe.
Bye.
Bye.